This podcast is sponsored by BPIExamPrep.com, the most affordable and effective way to make sure you ace any BPI certification exam. More at BPIExamPrep.com. Enjoy. Welcome to the Building Performance Podcast from Green Dream Group in Chicago. I'm Corbett Lunsford, and today we're talking about trends in high-performance building and retrofits with Keith Aldridge, who is the Vice President of Business Development at Advanced Energy. He is an American icon of the energy industry, and he is also the chair of the ACI board, which is the Affordable Comfort Institute board, and we are actually broadcasting from the ACI Regional Home Energy Conference in California. Keith, thank you so much for being on the show.
Sure, glad to be here.
So you and I were talking last night at the bar, as people are wont to do at conferences, and you were mentioning the kind of generation gap that we are dealing with right now. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I'm a boomer, and people of my generation, we got our information from mostly printed sources. If we want to learn about something, we read books. Some of us read more books than others, but that's the way our generation got information. And the written word was pretty much how we distributed information. I mean, we go to conferences and things like this. We now see, what I call the millennial generation coming along, which handles information very, very, very differently. It's more bite-sized. It's not any less in depth, but it's done in more bite-sized means and a lot of technology involved. And our world right now consists of both those populations. We still have the boomers. They're the ones making the decisions. They're the ones that don't understand, the millennials. But we also don't need to move too fast toward the bite-sized piece of information as a technique because we still have a lot of boomers. And so I see a lot of opportunity, but a lot of conflict in all areas of our society where we're trying to manage knowledge or put out information.
And as it pertains specifically to the high-performance building industry, how do you think technology can actually help and make it more efficient and more effective?
Technology in general? I think that there's very obvious advantages to the technology that allows us to break things down into bite-sized pieces and then marry live video to that piece of information. That's something you couldn't do with a book. To layer information so that if someone wants to read a Twitter-sized piece of information about something and then dig into it deeper, they can dig in as deep as they want to go using the technology that we have available right now.
You're talking mostly as a training tool, right?
Training, knowledge gathering. I think the technology also can help on actual performance of buildings. I think we're going to see a whole wave that our society, again, is not prepared for. Feedback mechanisms coming into buildings. We're already seeing them. In 15 years, I think we're going to look back on the feedback mechanisms, the smart grid, home energy management systems, feedback systems in commercial buildings, and we're going to look back kind of the way we look back now and wonder how anybody ever got along without email. And as we have all of that real-time data, we're really going to struggle with how to use it because already seeing people making silly decisions about how to use the data, already seeing utility companies that have had 1 hour of daily readings in their whole residential stock for 2 years and they don't know what to do with it. But there are going to be products that are going to be developed. People are working on it now. And I think that for building commissioning, for diagnostics, for program QA and QC management, if I was in the E, M, and V world for utilities, I'd be really...
Can you clarify what that stands for again?
Well, I'm sorry you asked me. Let's say evaluation, measurement, and verification. And in the future, when we want to verify whether work was done right, we'll know within a few hours whether it was done right. We won't hire another consulting firm 3 years later to come in and evaluate. There's going to be a lot of disruption in the marketplace, but all of it good.
Now, when you say you won't have to hire another consulting firm, you yourself happen to work for one of the most famous consulting firms in the country for this. That's taking business away from you, clearly. But I imagine that you have a plan for even more amazing work to happen with the time that you're not wasting going back and checking things that you can actually have real-time feedback for.
Yeah, I mean, it's the important thing is to front load all of this and make sure that people have the right standards, that they have the right training, that they know how to find the right houses or buildings if it's commercial buildings, that the products that they're using are the right products. one of the things that our industry has a long way to go on is products. We have not done much product innovation. There was some of it starting up about 5 or 8 years ago, and the recession kind of kicked it off the edge of the table. But I think we'll see a lot of better products in the future. So if you front load the process so that you're getting things done right as you go along, then you don't have to backload the process to find out why it didn't work. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it'll cost consulting firms like us business, but in the back end work. But any good consulting firm has to move with the times and adjust their products.
Sure. Now, product wise, I can imagine a time when product manufacturers are looking at each other's products and saying, how is this going to work with that? But also, because we're getting the ability to do that with technology and with people being more aware of the home as a system and all that. But also there are just more and more products. So I think that it's probably going to be a stalemate at some point. Do you think that products will be the solution at some point, or will installation always be as big a deal as it is now?
Installation is always going to be a big deal. It's true with anything, whether you're talking about installing ducts or designing a rocket so that it actually works. I mean, installation problems are always going to be paramount. But our industry hasn't done much in terms of looking at whole house solutions about products.
Can you give specific examples of products you would like to see?
I was just about to do that.
Oh, wonderful.
I have held in my hand a self-insulating, self-sealing duct system that never made it onto the market. That is very easy. Any do-it-yourselfer could clip it together. It's absolutely airtight. It insulates itself. Never made it onto the market. We have a hard time training people how to seal ducts. There's a product solution to that. Mini splits are another product solution to the duct problem. Is just get the ducts out of the house. We have talked to some companies about foundation systems. If you think about how we build foundations, crawl space, we dig a hole in the ground. We pour some concrete in it. We stack some concrete blocks up that we hope are done right and straight and to the right height and to all the codes. And then we put some goop on it to make it, quote, waterproof, unquote. We pile dirt around it. Somebody else comes in, digs a trench, lays a pipe with some gravel in it. You hope you put the holes on the right side. You hope you use the right kind of gravel so that it actually works. And then we cover it all up with dirt and hope that that works for the life of the house. And it's just a cobbled together, very inefficient, very expensive system. And you could make monolithic systems and there are some, stretches in that direction, but you can make monolithic systems for things like that. So those are two ideas. One of the more far-fetched ideas is about 5 years ago, there was a company that demonstrated a inkjet printer that sprayed concrete, and they sprayed a house. Now, it's made out of concrete. Nobody wants to live in a concrete house. But it didn't have to be concrete. It could be some other substance in the future. So, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity on the product side.
The visual of an inkjet printer spraying concrete I'm a little confused about that. So feedback, as far as having real-time feedback on the utility side, where you can see hour by hour or even minute by minute how much energy a house is consuming. Obviously, in places where electricity is the only source of energy, that's a lot easier because you've got every piece of the puzzle in one number that's coming back. Do you see that is a potential for all of the utilities around the country to be able to adopt at some point in the next 10 or 20 years?
Oh yeah. Maybe the gas industry is a little bit behind on their advanced meter technology, but it's out there and it's coming. And all it requires is a computer program and somebody that knows how to program the computer to integrate that data. And you already have to integrate the data with the ambient weather data and all those kinds of things. It's a simple computer program.
Do you see homeowners being as involved in the monitoring of that stuff, which is, I think, a big commercial push right now, like, hey, monitor your own house?
This is one of those generational things. Coming from the baby boomer, my perspective, I think it's an absolute joke to think that people are going to actually monitor their own energy usage. Yet, a lot of my younger colleagues are very excited about having those kind of systems. So they may yet have a real impact, and they're already having a minor impact where they've been tried. I just don't think they're the be-all and end-all that some of the commercial developers think they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have been in this industry for how many years?
Depending on how you define it, probably about 32 years.
Okay, I think that counts as a long time. You have probably seen it ebb and flow several different times. Is there, first of all, is there hope for the future? And second of all, what specifically is going to be needed in order to take this into the mainstream, which has, I think, been a goal just for better building and high performance, everything, to be more involved in the mainstream so that typical people think of it when they think of a construction project?
Yeah. I think that, my motto is customers first. First, we need customers. We've got to get consumers to understand that the problems that they're experiencing in their homes or their buildings actually can be solved, and that there's an industry out there that can solve them. It's not a problem to teach people that they have problems in their homes. Anybody who's been part of a neighborhood listserv or monitored, anything like that, you see all sorts of problems that people have around comfort, around kids with asthma, around mold smells, like this hotel we're sitting in. They don't know about combustion safety. They don't know a lot of the things that we think are very important, but they do know when they're uncomfortable and unhappy with their homes. They just don't know who to call. Unfortunately, we've had several waves of programs from electric utilities mostly and government where we semi-trained a lot of contractors to go out and do work in the buildings, and we taught the public that these programs don't work. And so we've got a lot of that to overcome in the next decade. I think we can do it. I think social media is going to be a big part of that. Conferences, consumer education. We need a lot of innovation around that, and we need to get the government and the utility industry to quit doing things that makes it harder, not easier for us. But
why do they? So two questions just to follow up what you're saying. You said we're teaching the public that those programs do not work, and I'm wondering what specifically you mean by that. I think that they typically don't work anywhere as well as they thought that they would, but do people have an opinion about them?
Yeah, well, the big problem is that every time we put an incentive program out, whatever the topic is, there are people who rush into that because they think it's going to be easy killing, and they don't really know how to do the work. Doing home performance work is very complicated. There are some very subtle things that a contractor has to know and understand, and if they don't know and understand those things, they make mistakes, and the homeowners are not happy. They either don't get the comfort they thought they were going to get, they don't get the energy savings they thought they were going to get, or actually the house makes them sick after the contractor leaves, which is the biggest worry. Training programs are typically inadequate. Everybody's always in a hurry when a program comes along to get a big number on the board the first year, and that's not how markets respond. Markets respond by a small number of people getting into the business, doing well at it, making some money at it, bringing their colleagues along. And that's not how we run programs. That's not how utilities and utilities commissions and the government think about things. That's been a huge barrier going back through at least 3 waves of this that I can remember in the last 25 years.
You would know because you're at the top of the pyramid. Is there some kind of a sabotage that's happening? I mean, the people who run these huge multi-million-dollar utility companies must know something about how to create a program that will work because it's been done. I mean, it's not like programs only exist in the energy sector. There are programs for all kinds of different things in different industries. Why do they keep failing in our industry?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think one of the reasons is a lot of the companies that we have put in charge of running these programs really don't want them to work. Is that we've put energy efficiency into the hands of the industry that is most hurt financially by energy efficiency. The electric utility industry, this is another trend that's going to dominate the next decade. The electric utility industry business model is changing. Loads are flat or declining. Renewables are making inroads. Energy efficiency is making inroads. Codes are making inroads. They're in a position where they have to replace huge amounts of coal-fired plants and some nuclear plants that were built 30 years ago. They're aging out. It's a tough position to be in electric utility world right now. So why would they be Why would they figure out how to be really, really good at delivering energy efficiency? Now, there are some of them who have, and they're excellent at it. But there's some other issues. Any public institution, we heard this addressed in a presentation here this morning, any public institution has a really difficult time being selective in a marketplace-type selection process about what contractors get to play in the market and what contractors don't. And so anytime a governmental agency, and electric utilities are essentially a governmental agency, is in charge of that, they have to let everybody in. The standards can't be too high. And so we get a lot of contractors come in. I've heard program operators talk about that, 20% of their contractors do all the good work and the other 80% cause them all the trouble. And if we had true marketplace mechanisms in place, the market would get rid of those other contractors. But the fact that we do all this through state-run organizations, federal-run organizations, makes it very difficult.
So the reason that the utilities are in charge of spearheading this effort is because they're legislated to, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption.
And how did the legislators decide that was a good idea? Because it does seem like an incentive to not actually do it very well.
Well, there is a very, from my perspective, a very thin thread of logic to why the electric utility should do this. And that is that in most cases, it really is in their economic best interest to do it. That they're much better off not generating the power than they are in terms of having to build new power plants. You can get an economist or two in a room and prove that that's the case. The mistake is that the electric utilities are not good at running energy efficiency programs. They're good at building power plants, and they're good at transmitting power. So while it might make sense on paper, it doesn't make sense from a corporate culture point of view. Now, I want to say there are some utilities who have adopted that strategy and have gotten very good at it. But by and large, these are companies that are set up to generate and transmit power, not to produce energy efficiency.
Do you see other kind of fundamental problems with the way things are set up, even just in the construction industry? I find personally that when I'm working on a new construction project, the framer must understand that he is an insulator as much as the insulation guy, because wherever he puts his wood is a place where you can't put insulation. So that those kind of little pockets and categories where everybody is distinct and different than each other kind of gets in the way, I think, on a single-family home. Do you see that on a macro scale?
Well, on a macro scale, in the sense that it's going on every job site in the United States. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge issue. And there have been some programs that have dealt with that pretty effectively. Masco's EFL program really had a very good way of dealing with that whole sequencing of the contractors coming onto the site. And there's a lot of subtlety involved in that if you're going to keep your schedule up, because that's what builders want, is they want to meet that schedule or beat it. And it takes a lot of subtlety to get those things to happen right. We've seen some exciting innovations in, you mentioned the framer and the insulator. I remember one instance where the big problem that this building company was having was getting insulation behind the shower installs. So, they couldn't put the insulation in, the showers would get there. I guess the showers got put in first, and then when the insulators got there, they couldn't get the shower insulated. And so it was a very simple solution that the people that were installing the shower were given a few bats of insulation and taught how to install those 3 bats of insulation. That's all they had to do. And it worked. So there's a lot of subtlety, but somebody has to think all that through. And most builders are just trying to get it done so fast. And again, it goes back to feedback. If their feedback system is their boss telling them they need to get the house built in 43 days, and that's all the feedback they ever get, then their priority is going to be to get the house built in 43 days. If there's a feedback mechanism that measures the performance of that house, the real performance of that house, the first day that it is finished, and the heating and cooling system is turned on and measured against the temperature, and that's something that's within our ability to do right now if we have a two-way system in the house, and then they get some kind of feedback based on the performance, then things will change.
Mm-hmm. What is your background? Did you start in building, or did you come from another
How long of an answer do you want to that? My formal training is as a community organizer. It's actually through social work. I have a master's of social work, but it's based around community organizing. I was doing community development work in central North Carolina, and I realized that the biggest thing that was impacting low-income people were jobs, of course, and energy and housing. And so I got a chance to go to work for a company we're now called Advanced Energy that was working on at least two of those. We think we work on jobs a little bit, but we work a lot on energy and housing.
Interesting. And as a community organizer, are you in favor? I mean, I know that you said that you don't believe that people really will monitor their own energy, but I wonder, I mean, especially in something like a passive house, which is it's just a system that's so inflexible that once anything weird starts happening, you install something that's not supposed to be there, the pressure changes, and all of a sudden, really strange stuff happens. I find that a lot of what I am trying to do is take behavioral issues that are going to cause problems in the building completely out of the equation. So a lot of controls and things like that. Do you think people want to be involved in how their house works and knowing all the complicated systems that are going to be installed and how the pressure balances and all that stuff? Or do you think people would rather just have products that take care of it for them?
I think most people would rather have products that take care of it for them. I think that, yeah, there's always people who would like to be directly involved because maybe they distrust the contractor marketplace, or they just like to know that. I mean, our office is full of people like that would like to have that information so they can go deal with it. But I believe that the systems of the future, if there's a problem with the HVAC system, if it's starting to slip below specifications, the system of the future is going to send a notification probably simultaneously to the homeowner, but it's also going to go to an HVAC contractor who's going to then schedule a visit out there to tune the thing up, rather than just having that on some calendar basis that makes no sense whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Wet crawl spaces, something we deal with a lot in the Southeast. If we give an alert to the homeowner, that's a second best alternative than there already to be in a service contract in place, so that alert goes to someone who will come out and service the house. So, I think we have to make this very, very simple for people.
Mm-hmm. We had Joe Nagin on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he is famous for going against what people consider to be the popular belief about anything. He uses, for example, a monolithic sheet of plastic in the attic as the air sealing layer. He calls it the air sealing package, and it apparently works really, really well. Most people think, plastic in the wall sections, or you need this or that. And I know that Advanced Energy has done a fair amount of research on the wet crawl space issue, which was a big, rule of thumb. Ventilate the crawl space all the time. Are there other things that you're seeing that we're all kind of accepting as the rule of science that actually aren't completely true, that might get in our way?
Well, the crawl spaces was a big one. Attic ventilation is another big one. Both of those came from kind of the same study that was a poor study done many years ago, and we followed it ever since. Ventilation in itself is probably the biggest, I wouldn't call it a myth, but it's the biggest problem we have. We argue and argue and argue, whether it's 10 CFM or 15 CFM. We have God knows how many hundreds of thousands of hours have gone into ASHRAE 62.2 trying to come up with a ventilation standard. But everybody knows that the ventilation in houses varies depending on the house. And that if somebody has 4 kids, 3 dogs, and they smoke, they need a lot different ventilation rate than somebody who's one person living in a home and takes a shower every 3 days. And
that's not either of us, right?
No, it was my mother-in-law. I just think that I think the feedback that I talked about earlier is going to help us with this. We have to get serious about pollution source control, which we are not serious about it. We did a study 5 or 6 years ago looking at formaldehyde, and we looked at well-ventilated houses versus unventilated houses, just using formaldehyde as a marker, and after 3 years we couldn't see any difference. And so the amount of formaldehyde that was being brought into the house in clothing and couches and dry cleaning was overwhelming the ventilation system, and this was a very good ventilation system. So ventilation is one of those, great frontiers we still have out in front of us. I can imagine a house in the future that there will be sniffers in the house. These things are getting cheaper and cheaper all the time. Source control is one thing, but it'd be nice to have a sniffer in the house that looks at the air and says, oh, the air here is too humid. I'm going to turn the fan on. Oh, there's toluene in the air. I'm going to turn the fan on. Oh, and maybe I'll send an alarm to the homeowner at the same time. Formaldehyde levels are high. I don't think.
How high are they? I mean,
I couldn't tell you.
You can't, or you won't.
No. I don't remember. We published
It's
a
secret.
study. It's not secret. It's just made us all scratch our heads.
That kind of reminds me. So there's radon issues, and depending on where you live in the country, you may or may not have heard about these, but there are some utilities who have decided that even mentioning the word air sealing is potentially making them liable for people dying of radon. And radon, as far as I know, has not actually conclusively been linked to people dying, but they think that it is. Is formaldehyde and toluene and all this stuff?
Radon is known as one of the largest causes of death in the United States. The reason it doesn't get a lot of hysteria in the marketplace is it takes a long time to die of radon poison in a house. But there are substantiated radon deaths, quite a few. I can't quote the numbers. But as far as air, you're talking about utilities wanting to stay away from this. We know how to handle radon in this industry. We know how to handle other issues in terms of air sealing. It goes back to, is that a company really committed to doing energy efficiency? Or is it something they're forced to do, and if their lawyers tell them that this is a dangerous area, it gives them an excuse to stay away from it? I think it's the latter.
Marketing, I find, is, first of all, probably mostly run by the millennials that we were talking about. But I wonder, so there's the kind of combination of, you've got a huge amount of knowledge about what marketing will work, because you've seen it over the last 30 years, people marketing things, and it doesn't work or it does work. Nowadays, it seems like the kind of catchphrases like energy audit or solar, this or that, or foam insulation seem to be the catchphrases. How are the programs, especially the ones that you guys are involved with as consultants, do you do a lot of help with their marketing messaging, or mostly just with the science?
Well, let me tell you that one of the things I've learned in 30 years is the biggest enemies that we have from doing home performance work are the lawyers and the marketing departments. And it's not because the marketing departments can't do a good job of marketing. It's because they think they can do such a good job that the company decides they don't have to spend money on doing quality installations. And it often becomes a choice in manufacturing companies. I can think of probably a dozen examples where after a program got started and they started to have success and the marketing people really bid in and were doing a great job, because there is this latent demand out there for these services. And but after it got to going, it was always the case that the marketing people got the money, and the technical people who were, going in front of their bosses and talking about very pedestrian subjects like, quality installations, always lost the battle. So I don't think we have any problem knowing how to market stuff. I've seen insulation companies that use the insulation handle as a place to go in and be very successful. I've seen, companies that make all sorts of products use their one product, but they blend it into a whole house package and be very successful at driving up the use of their products and getting whole house home performance done. But it seems like one of the most, always the inevitable cycle that the money goes away for doing the quality installation, and then it doesn't work anymore, no matter how much of the stuff you're selling.
Going back to the ventilation, you mentioned crawl space ventilation and attic ventilation. And just to get technical for a minute, can you explain exactly what the fallacies were and what actually is true?
I wish I could exactly. Basically, as I remember it, there was a study that was looking at removing moisture from the attic, and it was coming from the crawl space, and it was balloon frame houses, which we still have, of course. So it was a fallacious design. And basically what we were left with was the notion that we need to ventilate attics in order to remove moisture. And given our construction techniques of 50 years ago, that was a better strategy than not ventilating it. But we know how to build tight attics now. We know how to keep the moisture from the house from getting into the attic. We just didn't know that even 25 years ago. Crawl space is the same thing, is that if you don't know how to seal the crawl space, then you are better off ventilating. But we know how to seal them now. And so once we seal the crawl spaces, we don't have to worry about ventilating them anymore because there's not air, there's not moisture coming in anywhere.
Mm-hmm. The roof manufacturers were one thing that was kind of in the way of that as far as the product goes. They used to say, I believe, that it would void the warranty if you do not ventilate the roof cavity or the attic. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Do you guys, or do you know if this is a big thing where a lot of manufacturers, for example, in the HVAC industry, furnaces are built inherently leaky? The cabinet itself is a very leaky thing. It makes it difficult to pass a duct tightness test because the piece of equipment itself is difficult to get tight.
There are many programs that have air tightness standards that the cabinets are so loose that the cabinet itself makes them fail the air tightness standards.
Do the manufacturers seek advice on how to make their products actually work in the system of the construction of tomorrow?
I think the best answer is some do and some don't. And again, the marketplace will eventually drive that. But we've had a lot of good interactions with manufacturers over the years around issues with fireplaces, leaky cabinets, malfunctioning control systems on ERVs, lots of issues that we've had good response from the manufacturing world.
Excellent. What else are you excited about in the next 5 years?
I think the thing I'm most excited about is the feedback that's coming. We're already starting to build it into some of our program designs, and the thing that I get excited about is people don't understand this, and it's fun to play with something that I know eventually we're going to figure out, and people are going to be really glad they did. But right now, people don't see it coming, and I think it's going to make a huge change.
Awesome. Keith, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Keith Aldridge is the Vice President of Business Development at Advanced Energy in North Carolina. You've been listening to the Building Performance Podcast from Green Dream Group in Chicago. I'm Corbett Lunsford. Tune in next time.